get started. As Jennifer said, I was a former professor. I was born and raised down in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and after living all over the country and traveling all over the world, where am I living again but New Bedford? Scary how life kind of comes full circle. I was an alum at UMass Dartmouth down in southeastern Mass. And then I spent about 40 years of my life in California getting my PhD, and then also, I'm hearing music now. Getting my PhD, and then I was a professor for about 30 years at a small school north of San Francisco, Dominican University of California. I retired in 2020 and moved back to southeastern Massachusetts. A little more about me. As Jennifer indicated, I call myself a travel addict. I have visited 35 foreign countries at this point in my life, and I've made about 45 round-trip drives across the country. I lost count somewhere around 40, so it's just an estimate at this point. But I lived in San Francisco for all those years, and I would drive back to visit friends and family back here on the East Coast. So every Christmas and every summer, I would make the round trip, and so the entire country is kind of like my backyard, and I've been lucky enough to visit 40 of the national parks that we're going to talk about today. I'm not going to talk about all 40 of them, but anyway, I have already put 62,000 miles on my 2-year-old car. It did not know what it was getting into when I drove it out of the dealership, and I just published a travel memoir last year on my international travels. It's called At Home in the World: Reflections of a Travel Addict. So I do have a couple of copies of that for sale here if you'd like. I'll have information at the end on the slide about, you can also purchase it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. I love that cartoon on the left. I hope you can read the caption, but it says, "You must be crazy driving 800 miles in one day." I've always said that when I die, just bury me in my car with my hands on the steering wheel, because that was when I was happiest. So a little bit of introduction to the national parks. I'm going to give you a little bit of history and facts about the parks, but also lots of photos and so on, and talking about the attractions that you'll see. There are a total of 433 properties around the country that are managed by the federal government, and they've been awarded some sort of national status. And those are things like battlefields. So Gettysburg National Battlefield is an example of that. Historical sites, parkways like the Blue Ridge Parkway in Virginia, nature preserves, recreational areas, seashores like Cape Cod National Seashore here in Massachusetts, riverfronts, and memorials. So all of those are managed by the federal government. But the two major types of properties that are governed by the federal government are the national monuments, and there are 87 of those. And those are typically areas that were established by a presidential proclamation because they have some kind of draw in terms of a historical site, prehistoric stuff like fossils or petroglyphs or that type of thing, or scientific interest of some kind. So those are the national monuments, and again, the president usually declares those, and then they do have to, I think, eventually be approved by Congress. National parks, in contrast, there are 63 of them currently in the United States, and they are areas that were generally established by Congress to be set aside because of their outstanding scenic features or natural phenomena. So you will find that many national monuments over the years became national parks. They were expanded and they turned them into a national park, some of them fairly recently, and I'll highlight a few of those as we go. So this is a map of the United States showing the locations of the 63 national parks. And as you can see, they're really, of course, concentrated out west. California, Utah, Alaska have the most of them. Very little up here. We have Acadia up in Maine, which I'll talk about in a little while. But that's the lay of the land in terms of where our national parks are located in the United States. I found this map online and I thought it was hilarious. This doctor published, if you wanted to hit all the national parks in the continental United States in one fell swoop, that's the route you would have to take. And don't tempt me, I could do that tomorrow. But I think what he actually does on his website is he says, if you're in this part of the country, here are 3 or 4 that you could hit all on that trip. But you never know, you could hit them all in one trip. It would be amazing. So, as I mentioned, there are 63 national parks right now. The most recently added one was New River Gorge in West Virginia. That was added in 2020. The states with the highest number of national parks, California is the highest. There are 9 national parks in the state of California. Alaska is a close second with 8. Utah has its big 5, and then Arizona, Florida, Washington, 3 each, and then it goes down to either 2 or 1 for several remaining states. The very first national park was Yellowstone, and it was founded in 1872. President Ulysses Grant signed legislation that declared parts of Wyoming and Montana, and I like the quote, "It's a public park or pleasuring ground for the benefit and enjoyment of the people." So that was the very first national park back in 1872. After that, about 20 years later, Yosemite and Sequoia National Parks were added to the national park system. 1899 was Mount Rainier in Washington. 1902, Crater Lake, so again, a lot on the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest. And then in 1916, the National Park Service was established, and that's the governing body that runs the parks. So I promised I wasn't going to call on anyone in the front row, but I'll just throw this out to the audience in general. What do you think is the #1 most visited of all the national parks? We have here some contenders: Grand Canyon, Glacier Bay, Yosemite, Bryce Canyon, and Joshua Tree. Oh, someone's done their research. I heard some Grand Canyon, and I heard someone sneak in Great Smoky Mountain. That's not an option up there. But you're right. So the most visited of all the national parks is Great Smoky Mountain National Park. 13 million people a year descend on the Smoky Mountains. And look what a difference is. In a distant second place is the Grand Canyon with only 5 million people a year. And then almost tied for third place would be Zion National Park in Utah and Yellowstone in Wyoming. Before we get into the specifics of the national parks, admission to the parks, if you were going just to spend a day or a weekend in one of the national parks, the fees vary for daily entry. They're anywhere from $20 to $35 per car, so you could bring a whole family for that price. And usually the pass is good for 1 to 7 days. However, one of the best bargains in the planet is the annual pass that you can buy from the National Park Service. An annual pass that gets you into all the parks is $80 a year, which I think is a huge bargain. If you hit 3 parks, you've already gotten your money back. But it gets better. There's more. It's like QVC. For seniors, if you're over 62, the annual pass is only $20, and a lifetime pass is $80. So that's quite an investment. It was really funny. I didn't even think about the lifetime pass at the time, but I stopped at a ranger station in White Sands National Park, and I wanted to get the annual pass for seniors. I got carded. The guy said, "You have to be 62." And I said, I'm 66. And he's like, "No." So I had to show my license to get my pass. But they're really pretty. They look like credit cards, have wonderful designs on them. But what a bargain that is, to $80, and you can go to any national park you want for the rest of your life. So with that, let's hit the road and explore some of our national parks. So we'll start with the most popular, Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It was established in 1934, and it's on the border between Tennessee and North Carolina. As I said, it's the most visited of the national parks, And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that 2/3 of the American population live within a day's drive of the Smoky Mountains. So it's accessible to large parts of the country. You know, to get to Grand Canyon from here is a day's journey, many days' journey. So part of it is its proximity to so many population centers. The other thing is there's no entry fee if you want to drive through the park. There's a state highway that goes through both the Tennessee and North Carolina sections of the park, and you can drive through for free. You're only having to pay the registration fee if you're going to stop and hike or go camping or that type of thing. So that's why so many people just drive through, and we record all of those, even though they really may not have even stopped in the park at any time. The main entrances of the park are in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, which is a wild place of nothing but hotels and restaurants and amusement parks and so on. And then on the other side is Cherokee, North Carolina, and that's where all the travel services would be for the park. The Appalachian Trail for hikers runs right through Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And it's interesting, if you've ever been to the Smoky Mountains, you might wonder, why are they called the Smoky Mountains? They always have this haze over them, this grayish blue haze. And evidently the Cherokees called the mountains in this area Chaconage, which means place of blue smoke. And it's simply that the air is so humid and it kind of hangs over the mountains that you get this look to them. So it's kind of distinctive. They always have that haze over them. Here are some photos. Almost all of the photos that I'm going to show you today are photos that I've taken. I'll pick out a few that I didn't take. But these are some of the scenes within Great Smoky Mountain National Park. There's lots of waterfalls, lots of wildflowers. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. The Grand Canyon National Park is our second busiest park, most visited. And it was founded by President Woodrow Wilson back in 1919. And I like this quote from President Theodore Roosevelt. "The Grand Canyon fills me with awe. It's beyond comparison, beyond description, absolutely unparalleled throughout the wide world. Let the great wonder of nature remain as it is now. Do nothing to mar its grandeur, sublimity, and loveliness. You cannot improve on it, but you can keep it for your children, your children's children, and all who come after you as the one great sight that every American should see." And I heartily agree. It's an amazing place. So Grand Canyon National Park is located in northern Arizona, the upper northeast corner. It was, of course, created by the Colorado River through millions of years of erosion. And it is divided into two sections. There's the South Rim, which attracts 90% of the visitors that come to the Grand Canyon see the South Rim only. The elevation there is about 7,000 feet, and it's extremely warm in the summer. So if you're planning a trip in July and August, it's not the most pleasant place, and especially if you plan to go down into the canyon where it gets even hotter. The North Rim is a higher elevation and sees only about 10% of the visitors to the park. It is closed entirely during the winter months because it's inaccessible. It gets snowed in. If you wanted to see both rims of the canyon, it's about a 4.5-hour drive to get from one to the other. There's no direct route. There's no bridge across the canyon, so you have to do a kind of circuitous route to get up there. The Grand Canyon itself is 277 miles long, about 18 miles wide, and about a mile deep. Things to do at the Grand Canyon: you can navigate the scenic drives. There's a drive that goes along both rims of the canyon, north and south, and you can stop along the way and do observation points and short hikes from those spots. But there are three options if you want to reach the canyon floor, and I will tell you I have not done that yet. Probably won't be doing it anytime soon. One way is to hike down, and it's a very, very strenuous hike. It's anywhere from 7 to 9.5 miles, depending on which trail you take, each way, down and back. So you're talking about an 18 to 20 mile round trip. There's almost a mile of elevation gain coming back out, and there's almost no shade. And as I said, it's very warm, especially in the summer, and especially at the bottom of the canyon. Temperatures are probably close to 100 degrees. So it's very, very strenuous. You really have to be in great shape and really be prepared for that kind of a hike. You can take a mule trip. They are very expensive. It's about $500 to take a mule down to the bottom of the canyon, and it requires camping overnight at the bottom of the canyon. And unfortunately, they have weight limits. And since junior high or so, I have not been able to ride the mules. You have to be under 200 pounds. So I would not want to overtax the poor mules, so I have not done that. And then finally, if you're really adventurous, you can do a rafting trip through the Grand Canyon, which would be amazing, a great way to see it from the bottom up. There are week-long rafting trips, and that would require camping for several nights as you make your way through the canyon. There are helicopter tours, definitely. Oh, yeah. Yeah. At most of the parks there are. So these are some shots of the south rim of the Grand Canyon. Notice there's the pictures with snow in them. I think that was February when I was there, so there was a little bit of snow on the south rim. And here are some photos of the north rim. So as you can see, every bit as impressive as south rim. I only saw the north rim for the first time about 4 years ago. I was down there, and I loved it. I was a believer because it was so much less crowded. Really, really pleasant. Unfortunately, there was a fire that you may have read about a couple months ago in July. There was a lightning strike on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, and it caught with the winds and the hot weather and dry weather. The fire ignited, and it burned down the original lodge that was on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. The original lodge had opened in 1929. It burned down due to a kitchen fire back in 1932, and then they rebuilt it and reopened it. But the 2025 fire pretty much took it out again, so it is gone. And because there were ongoing fires that they couldn't get put out, the north rim was closed from July on, and they said it was going to remain closed for the remainder of the season, so it won't reopen now until spring. Zion National Park is located in southwestern Utah. It's about a 2.5-hour drive from Las Vegas. And Zion was Utah's first of its 5 national parks. It is the 3rd most popular park in the country, probably because it's so easily accessible from LA and Las Vegas and Salt Lake City. It was established in 1919 by Woodrow Wilson, the same year as the Grand Canyon. Zion, like the Grand Canyon, perhaps even more so than the Grand Canyon, is very, very hot, especially in the summer. So you would not want to go there in July or August. It's very, very warm. The scenic drives, and it has scenic drives that go through the canyon. It has some famous hiking trails that I'll show you a couple of pictures of in a second. And Zion Canyon is only 15 miles long. It was formed by carved out by the Virgin River that runs through the entire canyon. Here's some shots of Zion. They have these wonderful bighorn sheep that are really, really cooperative for photographers. They just stand there, they don't move, they pose, they smile. I was very impressed. And then the 2 pictures on the right-hand side I did not take because you couldn't pay me to do those hikes. There are 2 really famous hikes in Zion. One is called Angel's Landing, and that's the picture in the middle there where the guy is clinging to a chain on this little outcropping of rock. And the other one is the Narrows. The Narrows, actually, I would love to do something like that, but you go up through the canyon. It's a slot canyon. And as you can see, the hiker in there is walking in like knee-deep water. And you have to be really cautious there because they have flash floods that come down. It might be raining 30 miles away, and all of a sudden the water makes its way down the canyon and can catch hikers that aren't prepared unaware. So I have not done those 2, but they look amazing. Here's some more shots of Zion. The picture in the middle is called Checkerboard Mesa because it looks like a checkerboard with all the indentations in it. I love the picture in the upper right. I was there a few summers ago, and it started to pour as I was coming into the park. And that waterfall that's coming down was not there about 5 minutes before I took that picture. But it started to pour, and all of a sudden, waterfalls started coming from all the sides of the canyon. And I got to capture that, and within about 5 minutes, it was like someone had turned the faucet off, and it just stopped. So I was really excited that I caught it. Probably, I hate to play favorites, but Bryce Canyon is probably my favorite of all the national parks. It was declared a national park in 1928, and it's only about an hour and a half drive from Zion, so it's easy to hit the two parks in the same trip. But it's much higher elevation, much, much cooler up there. It's up 9,000 feet or so in places. It was named for Ebenezer Bryce, who was an early settler, Scottish immigrant, and a cattle rancher. And I love his quote. They make a big deal of it at Bryce, where he looks out at the amphitheaters of Bryce and says, this would be a hell of a place to lose a cow. The primary feature at Bryce are these amazing amphitheaters with 200-foot tall pinnacles, which are called hoodoos. And they've been formed by wind and water erosion. Bryce is also noted for having some of the best stargazing in the country, very dark skies. Basically, if you are in a city or in a rural, suburban area, you probably can see less than 2,000 stars on a good night. But on a good night at Bryce, 7,500 stars might be visible. I actually have a funny story about that. I took my friend Joyce came to visit me out in California. She's from here in Massachusetts. And we were in Utah in February, and we had gone out to dinner, and we were driving, and all of a sudden I pulled off into a dirt area, shut off all the car lights, and I just looked at her and said, "Get out." And she said, I had known Matt for 20 years, and she thought, this is where I find out he's a murderer. You know, I'm the next victim. But she obeyed, and she got out, and she said, I gasped when I looked up at the sky. The stars were just so amazing. It was that clear winter sky, and it's just unbelievable. Here are some views along the scenic drive at Bryce. Again, Bryce has a nice scenic rim drive that goes the length of the canyon, and you can stop along the way at various observation points and do small hikes and so on. That, I like the picture on the lower right. That's in the wintertime when there's snow on all of it. It changes the whole look of it when there's snow. Some more photos of the rim drive. That formation on the slide on the picture on the right is called the Watchman. It's a famous landmark. And then one of the amazing things to do at Bryce is to hike down into the canyon. It's a lot more manageable than the Grand Canyon. It is strenuous coming back. I'm never happy when I'm coming back up out of it, but it's an amazing loop that you can do. And to be in the bottom of the canyon and look up, to me it looks like you're looking up at giant chess pieces that are all yellow and gold and pink. It just gives you a whole different perspective on things. So it's definitely something to do. So you take your time and go slow, and you can do it. In fact, I love the picture on the left. That is, I don't know if you can make it out, it's a little dark, but there's switchbacks, a trail that goes down, and that's called Wall Street. And it's because it's like you're going between two skyscrapers. It's pretty amazing. Arches National Park may be my second favorite park. It is also in Utah, and it was established first as a national monument in 1929. Didn't get its national park status until 1971. It's located in the northeastern corner of Utah, very close to the Colorado border. And the nearest town is Moab, which is the kind of travel center that you would probably stay in if you were going to Arches. It's noted for having the highest concentration of natural stone arches in the entire world. They've categorized at least 2,000 of them in their catalog. This picture here is of Delicate Arch, which is not only probably the most famous site within Arches, but it's also kind of a logo for the state of Utah. Very famous. Yeah?
Question. Did you travel on Route 12 from
Oh,
Bryce?
absolutely.
That was the most fantastic road
I recommend that to everyone. So you got to get on Route 12 from Torrey down to Escalante. Yeah, fantastic. Not a national park though, but
right.
just as it's amazing. Here are some of the amazing shots from Arches. The formation on the upper right is called the Spectacles, which I think is cute. Looks like some eyeglasses. The picture on the lower left, it reminds me of something from a set from Star Trek, like a time portal that people would go through. What's beautiful about Arches, too, is that it backs up against the La Salle Mountains on the Colorado-Utah border. So there's almost always, even in the middle of summer, there's snow-capped mountains in the background, which makes just a really nice contrast with all that red rock. There's Canyonlands National Park in Utah. It wasn't established until 1964, so relatively recently. It is about an hour and a half from Arches, but much, much less visited. It's an unusual park because it's divided into three sections, three distinct districts, if you will. One of them is called Island in the Sky, and that's the most accessible one. Then there's the Needles, which is more remote. You have to drive about a 50-mile dead-end road to get down to the Needles, and you can hike around down there, but then you have to come back out the same way. And then there's the Maze, which is really inaccessible unless you've got a four-wheel drive vehicle or unless you're going to hike into it. The most famous, probably, of all the landmarks in Canyonlands is Mesa Arch. I have to tell you, I took this picture. It was really disappointing because there was a line of people, like 40 people in line to take this picture. And so it was like you have to line up your shot, take it, and get out of the way. It was really, I was amazed how crowded it was. But that's like the thing that everyone does at Canyonlands. They go and take a picture of Mesa Arch, and then they go back to Moab and have a beer. I would imagine it would be, yep. But I also have heard you have to fight with hundreds of people to jockey for position to get that picture. Here are some other pictures of two of the districts. The Needles district, I did drive down there. And then the Island in the Sky district, you look down over the canyons of the Green River and the Colorado River that have carved these amazing canyons into the surrounding area. Rounding out Utah's Big Five national parks, there's Capitol Reef National Park, which was established in 1971. It's a very remote area in central Utah, and it's named for these white dome-like formations that kind of look like Capitol buildings, not only the national Capitol, but state Capitol buildings that have that white dome. You can see one of them kind of behind that tree there. It contains a lot of historic homesteads and orchards from the original Mormons that settled the area. And it also, like Bryce, it has a gold-tiered dark sky status, which means it's an amazing place for stargazing because there's just so little light pollution in that area. This is the Fremont River Valley. The Fremont River kind of winds through Capitol Reef. It is particularly beautiful, I think, in the spring when the trees start getting their leaves, and you have that brilliant green, the brilliant blue skies, and the red rock. It's really something.
How far is that from Salt Lake?
From Salt Lake, probably a good 3 hours. And as the gentleman here mentioned, there's a Route 12 goes from Capitol Reef down to southern Utah towards Bryce and Zion, and it's not to be missed. These are some photos from within Capitol Reef National Park. I love the picture on the right, that rock, which just looks like something from outer space. It's got all these air holes in it. Again, the beautiful foliage that really brings out the red rock. One of my favorite things about Capitol Reef is there's the Gifford Homestead, which was an old Mormon settlement, and they make some of the best pie I have ever had, and believe me, I've had a lot of pie in my life. And so they often sell out in the afternoons. So when I've been driving across the Southwest, I will call them and say, could you put aside a rhubarb and a peach for me? They're that good. And you can sit out on picnic tables, and that deer was kind of eyeing me, and it was like, no, there was no way I'm sharing my pie with him. It wasn't good for him anyway. I want to save him from cholesterol and sugar. There's also amazing petroglyph displays in Capitol Reef as well, and they're very accessible. You just park and you walk maybe 5 minutes, and you can see some really amazing drawings. And then my personal belief, I would like to petition Congress and the president to just declare Utah one big national park. It is one of them. It's my favorite state, actually, maybe aside from Hawaii. If they had an ocean, I could live there. Great Salt Lake just doesn't do it for me. But it is just spectacular everywhere you go. So all of these pictures that I've taken here are going between the national parks. The picture in the middle on the upper one is an interesting one. I was in Utah a couple summers ago, and it was getting towards sunset, and I was going to go into, I think it's Dead Horse State Park, and I was going to go there to try and take sunset pictures. And it was within an hour of closing time. They still wanted like $25. It was a state park to go in there. And I said, I don't really want to spend 20 bucks to just go for a few minutes. So I just went down a dirt road. I passed a lot of cattle. And all of a sudden, the road kind of dead-ended. And that was the view at the end, just looking out on those amazing canyons. I was just in awe. So I wasn't in any national park there at all. But what a place to watch sunset.
It's a very doable drive to do the loop from Moab.
Oh, absolutely.
To, the Canyonlands, the Arches, and Capitol Reef, and then somewhere.
Absolutely. You could do a whole week or two in Utah. I love the picture on the upper right. It makes me think that the Navajos, for their designs on their blankets, copied the mountains that they were surrounded by because of just the patterns on the mountains. The picture in the middle on the lower side is Mexican Hat Rock. It looks like an upside down sombrero down near the Arizona border. That's the goosenecks on the right-hand side where the river has just carved out that amazing canyon. And wait, there's more. This is again, let me see. That's Mexican Hat. Mexican Hat Rock, yep. And again, Utah should just be one big national park. That photo on the left is the Moki Dugway. You're driving through a valley, and all of a sudden there's this switchback about a mile long, and it climbs something like 3,000 or 4,000 feet, and you get up to the top of the mesa, and you can look out over the whole valley. The picture in the middle on the upper right is Goblin Valley Goblin Valley State Park in Utah, and there are just hundreds of those formations, and you can walk all amongst them. They really look like space aliens. The two pictures on the upper right, that's an area you have to know where to look to find it. It's off Route 12 in Utah, and it's called Singing Canyon. And I found it one year that I was there, and I've always gone back to it. It's just a slot canyon. You walk in, the greenery is amazing. It's so peaceful and quiet. You can hear your voice echo. And the last time I went there, came down the road and approached where I knew it was, and there must have been 20 cars there, and I wanted to weep. It's like, oh, they found it. They have found my hideaway. But what it was a wedding. A local family was holding a wedding in the canyon, and I thought that is a beautiful thing to have that there. And they were all local, and they let me go in and pay my respects before they had their ceremony. Monument Valley down here on the lower left, that's the entrance to Arizona through the Navajo country. Just an amazing place. And then there's Yellowstone. Yellowstone, again, I mentioned earlier, was our first national park established back in 1872. It's probably the most fourth visited national park now. And it's located mostly in Wyoming, but there are little slivers of it in Montana and Idaho as well. I had only been there once before, and I was driving cross country, and so I didn't stay long, and I wasn't all that impressed with it. But I went back last summer and spent 3 or 4 days in the park, and oh my gosh, it is unbelievable. The park is sitting on top of a still active supervolcano called Dara. And so you have all these amazing hot springs, you have geysers like Old Faithful, and then you have just amazing wildlife there. It's like driving through a petting zoo. There's so much wildlife in the roads. This is an amazing place. It looks like it should be on Venus. It's the Grand Prismatic Spring at Yellowstone. the hot springs, the geysers, the pools just really do give it an otherworldly look. I have a funny story from Old Faithful. Old Faithful, it's hard to get a straight answer from anyone there about how often it goes off. I remember chatting with people. It was really cold. I was there in early April, and it was very, very cold. And I'm asking some people around, and someone said, oh, the ranger said it's like every 3.5 hours. And then someone said it's every 42 minutes. And someone said it's supposed to go off in 16 minutes. So there are bleachers that they set up around Old Faithful, so you can sit out on the bleachers and wait. And it was really cold and really windy. And after what seemed like an eternity, there was some noise. And then there was a rumble. And then it gurgled. And then about 6 inches of water gurgled out of the ground. And then it stopped. And in the silence and it carried by the wind, my voice went, that better not be it. Which got a big laugh. And then it started gurgling again, and then it did that. So it really was worth the wait, but you have to be patient. More scenes within Yellowstone. The picture on the lower left is called the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, so the river carves through there in this amazing valley. The picture in the middle on the upper row that's Yellowstone Lake, which is a gigantic lake. This was probably beginning of May now. Most of the entire lake is still frozen over at that point, except for this one area where there are these little hot springs and geysers. There's a little mini volcano here that melts the ice, but otherwise the entire lake is frozen well into May. And then we have the amazing wildlife. I took all these pictures. I used zoom lens on my camera, so I wasn't as close as it might look. But we have a grizzly bear. We have a silver wolf, gray wolf, a black bear, a red fox. The little bluebird there, he was actually at Old Faithful waiting for the thing to go off with the rest of us. A bighorn sheep and an elk. And it truly stunned me. You know, you go to these parks and you think, I wonder if I'll see anything. My God, they were everywhere. It was hard to avoid them. That is my favorite t-shirt. I bought that t-shirt when I was at Yellowstone. Please do not take selfies with the fluffy cows. If you spend any time on the internet, there are dozens of videos of fools that are out there with their phones trying to take selfies with a bison behind them. And then they're really shocked when they're gored to death by these things. They're enormous. There are hundreds of them wandering the roads, but they're not pets. They are wild animals, and they're not real thrilled with being approached.
So we were out there, one of them was in the road, and there was backup on either side for ages. And one of them came right next to the car.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, his head was right here. They're big.
They're huge.
And so I was telling my wife, I said, you could roll down your window and paddle if you wanted.
Well, I'm glad you didn't, because they will. I just recently saw a video where kids are hanging out a window of a car and it gores the kids.
Yeah, no, it's
So
amazing because they don't, it's like, I guess, the safari parks, they don't think of cars as anything.
no, it's their world, and we're invading it. And at this time of year, too, there were a lot of mothers with calves. And so, again, they get really protective at that time.
We had one stop in the middle of the road, literally in the middle of the road, and called for her calf.
Uh-huh.
And then she nursed right there in the middle of the road.
Who are we to get in the way, right? And then here are all my wonderful bear pictures. Again, I couldn't believe how many opportunities I had to photograph the bears. That was another t-shirt that I bought while I was there, because I love to photograph my meals when I'm traveling. So this struck me really funny. But the story here about the poorly trained bears, when I was leaving Yellowstone on this trip, I think it was the second day I had left the park, and there was a story in the news that a family had written to the National Park Service at Yellowstone complaining that they had spent all this money to come to Yellowstone. They said, you need to train your bears better to come to where the people are, because we didn't see any the whole time we were there, and we spent a lot of money to come here. And I'm just, number one, it's like, I don't know where you were that you didn't see bears, because they were everywhere. But you need to train your bears to come where the people are. I studied psychology for 40 years. I always say I'll never understand people. Okay, heading down into the southwest, we have White Sands National Monument. I didn't update it. See, that's how out of date I am. It was a national monument until 2019, and then it is now a national park as well. It's located in southern New Mexico. The easiest way to get there probably is from El Paso, Texas, but also it's near Las Cruces and Carlsbad, New Mexico. The big feature here are these white sand dunes that are made of gypsum crystals. And you also have fossilized human footprints in North America, some of the oldest in North America. It is adjacent to the White Sands missile base, so occasionally when they're doing missile testing, they have to close the park down. But it's not a large park, but it's just really, it's just so surreal with the scenery. I also noticed that there were a lot of kids that brought sleds. I guess the gypsum crystals are really slippery, so on many of the dunes, kids were tobogganing down the sand dunes, which was a whole different thing that I hadn't expected to see. It really is a photographer's dream. There's the interplay of the clouds and the skies and the plant life and so on. Really, really beautiful.
Is it declared, I mean, it's obviously a desert. Is there a name for the desert? It's just all white sands?
The whole White Sands National Park is probably, 15 square miles. It's a very small area of dunes where the wind has just kind of gathered the dunes in that corner. I'm all about food, and if you're in this part of the world, you have got to sample some of the traditional dishes there. I've never been a huge fan of Mexican food, but I love New Mexican cuisine. Two of the major things to try when you're down that way, they cook a lot with blue corn, and so blue corn pancakes with pinion nuts or pine nuts. That's a tradition down there, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Taos, delicious. And then I love stuffed sopapillas. Sopapillas they serve in many Mexican restaurants as a dessert, and they put some honey or some powdered sugar on them. But only in New Mexico, and you won't find it anywhere else, they do stuffed sopapillas where they have large sopapillas that they then stuff with the kind of things that you would put in a burrito. So you can get chicken or pork or beef, the lettuce, the tomatoes, the sour cream, the guacamole, and so on. And it's like Indian fry bread. It's very light and fluffy, and I love it. So when I cross New Mexico, I have 3 restaurants that I go for sopapillas, and it's like I'll have lunch there, dinner there, and lunch there tomorrow. Got to get my fill of my sopapilla. In this same general area is Mesa Verde National Park. It became a national park in 1906. It's down in the southwest corner of Colorado. The nearest towns would be Cortez and Durango. It's the largest archaeological site in the United States, and there are about 600 cliff dwellings. This is one of the most dramatic, obviously. It's called Cliff Palace. They don't all look like this. Some of them are just literally a simple little house or something built in the cliffside, but there are 600 of them. The area has been inhabited by the Anasazi people as early as 5000 BC, and they started building these amazing cliff dwellings around 1200 AD. You can take tours of the area. The picture on the left is mine, and then the pictures on the right are from the National Park Service. But if you go in the morning to the Visitors Center, what you want to do is sign up for ranger-led tours, and they will take you on tours of some of them. Some of them are kind of strenuous. You have to climb up ladders and stuff to get to things, but it's really an amazing experience to do. Zipping down south to the Everglades became a national park in 1947. They're located about a couple hours drive from either Miami or Fort Lauderdale. And the creation of the park was really important, not only for recreational purposes, but it was valuable to try and protect the wildlife and the ecosystem in this area, the wetlands and forests in South Florida. The park is home to 350 bird species and 300 species of fresh and saltwater fish. And they have lots of other wildlife there. There are panthers, manatees, alligators, bears, and sea turtles. And can everyone see the well-camouflaged Everglades resident in the picture? They are everywhere. I'm just amazed at how many alligators there were, especially the day that I was there. They were just, it was kind of like, where's Waldo? Just trying to find alligators. Here's some of the wildlife of the Everglades. I love the picture at the upper left. I was in the car, and I just driving by, but I used my zoom lens on him. But he hissed at me and opened his mouth. It was just perfect. It was very photogenic. I love the little crabs. Those are stone crabs or rock crabs, I believe. I got out of the car at a place, and the ground looked kind of maroon. And when I took one step, the whole ground moved. It was hundreds of these things. And they react to every reflex that you have, and they just all boo and run away. And they have the one giant claw and then the one small claw, but they're really cool. The birds are turkey vultures that were in the road. Can you find the blue heron in the lower left picture? He's kind of hiding behind the fern over there in the right-hand side. I love the fish in the middle. He has an eye in his tail and in his head, camouflaged so that a predator will bite his tail instead of his face. And then yet another alligator showing his lovely teeth. Here's what the scenery looks like in the Everglades. Of course, you don't want to visit the Everglades in August. It's a little hot, a little humid, but it's really beautiful. I love that the Park Service seems to have a sense of humor. Rock Reef Pass, elevation 3 feet, is the highest point in the national park. There are wonderful boardwalks and lots of flowers and fauna to look at, and alligators sunning themselves everywhere you can look. Again, we have to stop for lunch. I love alligator bites. They're like alligator meat medallions, and they serve them all around the towns all around the Everglades. They kind of taste like chicken. They're a little tougher maybe, but they have dipping sauces for them. Had a rock crab lunch in Everglades City, which was really special. And then, of course, you cannot visit South Florida without having key lime pie, and that was one of the better ones. From Florida, we zip up north to Acadia National Park, which became a national park in 1916. It's our closest national park from here, located on the southeast corner of Maine. And at the end of the 19th century, the Mount Desert Island, which is kind of the center of the park, was the summer home of many of the wealthy families in America, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts. And Rockefeller was opposed to allowing cars to be driving around on the island. So he financed the construction of many carriage roads for horses and buggies to go through the park. And now they make amazing hiking trails or biking trails that go all through the park. This is a particularly beautiful part of the park is Jordan Pond. And I just happened to catch it in some beautiful light. One of the things that you can do at Acadia is you have to pay an extra fee and get a ticket, an entry ticket, but you can drive up Cadillac Mountain, and these are the vistas from the top. So looking north, you see the town of Bar Harbor, which is kind of the gateway to the park, and then looking out to the south and west, you see the islands off the coast, which are really lovely. Again, beautiful, spectacular Maine scenery. I love that I caught that wave just at the right point as it was hitting the shore. And then you have to partake in some of the culinary traditions in this area. One of the big things to do, I found out at the park, is to have popovers on the lawn at the Jordan Pond House. So there's this huge restaurant on the shores of Jordan Pond. They put all the tables and chairs out on the lawn, and they serve warm popovers with blueberry jam. And it's a really good way to spend an hour or so. Also, then you can dart into Bar Harbor and get amazing blueberry pancakes, and you have to have a lobster roll when you're in Bar Harbor. So great eating up that way. Back out west, we have Yosemite National Park in California. It was one of the earliest national parks. It was established in 1890. However, President Lincoln had actually signed a land grant many years before, back in 1864, to try and protect this area because he recognized how scenically beautiful it was. Yosemite is located in California's Sierra Nevada mountains. It's known for these granite cliff formations, and it has amazing valleys and waterfalls. It's one of the most visited national parks, probably because it's almost equally distant between San Francisco and Los Angeles, so it gets a lot of visitors from those cities. I have to say that in my time in California, I hated seeing what happened to Yosemite. It just became so crowded. I never wanted to go there in the summer. It was just bumper to bumper traffic. What I would usually do is if there was a big rainstorm in the Bay Area in the winter, I knew that meant it was snowing out at Yosemite. And so I would, as soon as they cleared the roads, I would be on the road and I would drive out there, and I had virtually the whole place to myself. And that was when it was absolutely spectacular. But it's just really a problem with the overcrowding. Of course, the famous photographer Ansel Adams made the area famous with his black and white photography. I had a little fun with that here. I'm no match for Ansel, but I try. So I tried to match up some of my photos on the top with some of his. Not quite the same, but I thought I did pretty well. Also in California is Joshua Tree National Park. It was a national monument since 1936, but they gave it national park status in the 90s. It's located in California's Mojave Desert. It's about a 3-hour drive from LA or San Diego. And the park itself covers an area larger than Rhode Island, which I know is not that hard to do, but anyway. Joshua trees are a type of yucca that grow only in cooler, higher elevations in the desert there. So as you're driving the roads, you'll see suddenly a Joshua tree, and then you might see two, and as you're going up, and then all of a sudden you get to a certain elevation and there'll be a forest of them. And then if you get too high, they all disappear again. So they only grow at a particular elevation. The name comes from supposedly Mormon pioneers who thought that the outstretched tree branches looked like people praying with their arms out in prayer. So that's where they got their name. And aside from the amazing Joshua tree forests there are really wonderful jumbled rock formations. It's a big place for rock climbers and stuff, but it's really looks like, again, another planet. I believe they actually filmed some of the TV show Lost in Space out there in the 60s because it looks that otherworldly. Here are some pictures of Joshua Tree, featuring the Joshua trees and the jumbled rocks. And again, Joshua Tree is out near the mountains, so in many parts of the year you can see the snow-capped mountains in the background. They make a nice backdrop to the Joshua trees. And then in far northern California, we have Lassen Volcanic National Park. Lassen Peak is the southernmost of all the Cascade volcanoes, like Mount Rainier and Mount St. Helens and Mount Hood. It's in Northern California, and it last erupted between 1914 and 1917. That was one of the reasons they turned this into a national park. It was partly to protect the area. It was also to try and protect people so they could regulate people going and getting too close to the active volcano. Since 2020, unfortunately, there have been a lot of the California wildfires that have been going on have affected big portions of Lassen. A lot of it has burned. The good news about that is, like, I remember going to Mount St. Helens about 10 years after it had erupted, and stuff was already growing back. There were wildflowers, there were small trees growing, so it will come back, but it is sad that it's been damaged by the fires. This is one of my favorite pictures that I ever took. It's called the Painted Dunes in Lassen, and that's all these weird volcanic deposits that make these amazing patterns. It just I had someone challenge me at one of my talks and say, that's not a real photo. That's artificial intelligence. That's you've photoshopped. And it's like, no, that's the picture. That's what it would look like. Some more scenes of, move my finger. More scenes of Lassen. That's a huge cinder cone on the lower left there. You can actually climb up that. Very difficult walking because of the loose gravel and so on, but that's a volcanic cone. And again, another shot of the painted dunes there. And then Hawaii. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park is located on the Big Island of Hawaii. It used to be Hawaii National Park, and it included both the peaks on the Big Island of Hawaii as well as Haleakala on Maui. It was all part of one park. In 1961, they decided to divide the parks into two. So Hawaii Volcanoes encompasses Kilauea and Mauna Loa on the Big Island of Hawaii. Mauna Loa is one of the largest volcanoes by volume in the world, and Kilauea is one of the most active volcanoes. The picture on the upper left I took during one of my hikes there when you could get that close to the lava flows. It was one of the peak experiences of my life, just to get that close to things. The picture on the lower part, I did not take that, but that is what's going on at Kilauea right now. They're having these amazing eruptions with these lava fountains, and I wish I could get over there and see that, because it must be just amazing to see that. The area is sacred to Hawaiians. They believe that their volcano goddess Pele is thought to reside at the crater. Some more pictures. That's the Kilauea crater when it's not erupting, with those lava fountains on the left-hand side. And the picture on the right was taken from a helicopter ride, and it's called a skylight. So part of the lava has given way, and you can see the lava working its way out to the sea through that skylight. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park also has some unique wildlife. It has the nene, which are a wild goose, and they only live on the Big Island of Hawaii and Maui at certain elevations. They like the high elevations on the mountain peaks. The berries in the lower left there are ohelo berries. You can eat them. They are supposedly sacred to Pele. It's one of her favorite foods, the volcano goddess. And so you'll actually, if you wander around Volcanoes National Park, you'll find little shrines. People will put a lei of flowers. They'll put ohelo berries. They'll also put little nips of brandy, because supposedly Pele likes brandy. So that's a way to appease her so she won't destroy your home. And then these are on the right-hand side, that's the lava just emptying into the ocean and causing these huge steam explosions. Again, amazing to see if you're there when things are active. Over on Maui, originally part of Hawaii National Park, but then it broke off in 1961, and it's Haleakala National Park. Haleakala is the Hawaiian word for House of the Sun. It's a 10,000-foot, we think, dormant volcano. We hope it's not going to wake up again anytime soon. It's very popular. One of the things to do on Maui is to drive up there before sunrise and then watch the sunrise from the top of the peak. It's really cold up there. It can be 32 degrees in the morning, so you have to dress accordingly. That's me with, I grabbed a bedspread from the bed at my bed and breakfast to wear up there when I was watching sunrise. And on the left there, that is within Haleakala National Park. It's one of the most beautiful hikes I've ever done. It goes through these amazing bamboo forests, and you come out on this fantastic waterfall, Waimoku Falls. And then last but not least, a few honorable mentions. Badlands National Park in South Dakota, Redwood National Park in California, Glacier in Montana, Crater Lake in Oregon, Glacier Bay. For that, you have to take a plane from Juneau and fly out to, or take a boat out to Glacier Bay. And Guadalupe National Park in Texas. I never expected to see mountains like that in Texas, but it's really, really pretty. So to wind up the presentation, I'd like to talk a little bit about the challenges to our parks. You have to keep in mind that most of the national parks were planned so that they would be accessible by car. When they put these places aside, they wanted people to be able to have access to them, to see them. However, many of them are experiencing severe overcrowding at this point. The annual visitorship at the national parks is close to 300 million a year. And 50% of that is focused on only 25 parks. So that's a lot of concentrated tourism in certain areas. Some experiences that I've had with that, I told you about Yosemite already, that I even stopped going in the summer. This picture here is Great Smoky Mountain National Park. That was in early spring. That was before Easter. You see the trees are still bare. And it was a weekday. And that was the traffic trying to get out of this Cades Cove loop that there's no other way out. So I sat in traffic like that for about 45 minutes. When I went to Acadia, I think I was there last fall, and I went in late September. The foliage wasn't really doing much yet, and it was a weekday, and I drove around the visitor center parking lot for about a half an hour, and I have really good parking karma. But I joked when I finally got in, I looked at the ranger, I said, I've had an easier time parking in Boston. So really, really crowded. The National Park Service actually works with social scientists to try and figure out how do we cope with these increasing crowds. Some of the solutions they've come up with, timed entry. So some of the national parks, you have to make a reservation in advance and say, I will enter the park between 9 and 10 a.m. And so they channel the traffic that way. This is Arches National Park, and you can see all these people trying to get in. That timed entry plan is being implemented at many parks now, Acadia, Arches, Zion, Rocky Mountain. They usually do that during the heat of the day. Like I was at Arches, and I found that at 5 o'clock you didn't need a reservation, so I would go in at 5 o'clock. And then it didn't get dark until about 9:30, so I had 4.5 hours to just play. But if you're planning to be there in the middle of the day, you have to make a reservation. Some other solutions, they try to encourage people to use shuttles. So at places like Grand Canyon and Bryce and Zion, you can get on a shuttle bus, and it will take you to the different observation points along the scenic drives, and then you can hop off and take pictures and wait for the next bus. At Zion, that is required in the summer. You can't drive your car into the valley because there's just too much traffic. And I like this, the gates of the Arctic National Park doesn't allow any vehicle access, and it's the least visited of our national parks. It kind of goes hand in hand. Some other challenges to the park are invasive plant, insect, and animal species. They hitchhike on people's boats, planes, and cars. And they introduce foreign species into the parks. There can be air pollution from all the traffic and from nearby communities, and sometimes you'll see in some of the western parks, they'll show on a clear day you can see this far, but because of smog coming over from Phoenix or Tucson or Los Angeles, the view has been obscured. It ruins the stargazing and sometimes. There's lack of funding for maintaining the roads and the buildings within the parks, and right now they're challenged with the government shutdown, so they're trying to man things and keep things open, but a lot of the facilities have to be closed because they don't have the staffing. There's damage to the fragile environment. You have all this traffic, you have people that foolishly litter, driving off-road vehicles, snowmobiles and stuff on places they shouldn't be doing it. And you get noise pollution. You're out in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden a helicopter flies over, and it's like, yikes, what's this? So that's some of the struggles. This one really pisses me off, pardon my French. But graffiti in the national parks is becoming an increasing problem. I was just reading an article about this online, and they said that with social media, people are kind of bragging about their vandalism and showing their artwork on the web, and it's encouraging more and more people to do it. In 2014, this quote-unquote street artist named Casey Knockett defaced rocks in several national parks, Zion, Death Valley, Joshua Tree, Rocky Mountain, Yosemite. That's one of her lovely drawings that she's displaying there, and she would photograph them and then post them online. So luckily, they tracked her down, and they find her, and they made her do community service and so on. But it's just really frightening. On the left-hand side, that's graffiti in Joshua Tree National Park. So people just go in there and start tagging the rocks the way they do buildings in Los Angeles. And this is really disturbing. There were, in 2020, during the shutdown, there were a lot of acts of vandalism at Joshua Tree, paintball, fights and graffiti and so on. People were cutting down the Joshua trees. I don't know what they were doing with them or why. In 2024 at Lake Mead National Recreation Area, people were toppling rock formations over the top of a cliff, and there could have been boats or people down below. And this one really is frustrating, abusing the wildlife. Again, the whole thing about don't pet the fluffy cows. In 2016, a Canadian tourist captured this bison calf and put it in their car because they thought it might be cold. And they brought it to a visitor center. And of course, unfortunately, they had handled the animal. It would not be reunited with its mother because it had been handled by a human being, and I think it had to be put to sleep. Our smiling alligator friend here, I was down in the Everglades, and I walked to the end of this pier, and all of a sudden it was like a trained dog. This alligator swam across and was right underneath the pier. And there was a ranger there, and he just shook his head and he said, they've been feeding this one. He says, now as soon as they hear footsteps on the planks, they think, oh, it's feeding time. And he said, people throw rotisserie chickens in to just watch the animal eat it. I noticed that in one of the pictures I took, there were Cheetos everywhere in the water. So people were just throwing Cheetos down to feed the alligators. Alligators don't want your Cheetos. So this is one of the biggest problems, is trying to educate people to stop this kind of ridiculous behavior. The most dangerous national parks. Grand Canyon has the dubious honor of being the most dangerous of all of America's national parks in terms of how many people are killed or injured every year. Many of those are falls, so people run to the edge to take their picture. But a lot of it is exertion and heat stroke and sun exposure. So people, again, don't plan well for the temperatures there, and they get dehydrated. Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the #1 source of injury there is auto accidents, again, because of all the traffic that they have there. And then at Yosemite is #3. There's a lot of drowning. People try to approach the waterfalls and don't realize the force of them. And also climbing up some of these precarious places and then trying to take selfies as they're climbing Half Dome and falling. So this was one experience I had was at Volcanoes National Park. As I say, this is how close I was to lava flows. And the Park Service has them roped off with police tape. It's like, don't go beyond this point. And it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. I brought a picnic dinner out there. I watched it get dark, saw the glowing lava. It was fantastic. People would come down the trail, and then they would climb over the police tape. I remember one man standing out on rock, not unlike the picture on the right, and he was in, of course, flip-flops, rubber flip-flops. And he said, I think my shoes are melting. And it's like, well, why in God's name are you out there? Is it not close enough where I'm standing right now? Why do you have to get closer? And people are, sometimes the crust of the lava will break through and people are injured. So again, I've studied people all these years. I will never understand them. But that's probably one of the biggest problems that the parks face, is just trying to control people. And this is just a list of probably the most likely contenders for national park status over the next few years. So some new states may be getting national parks, like Georgia and Idaho, Arizona, Illinois, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and more in Alaska. So that is my presentation. Just wanted to point out a couple things. That is my email address there. And I have a travel website online. It's called mattatHomeInTheWorld.com. You can get a lot of my domestic pictures, my domestic road trip stories and so on. Some of my international travel is on there. And then, as I said, I have written a book called At Home in the World, Reflections of a Travel Addict, which you can find at Amazon or at Barnes & Noble. And I do have a few copies here. If someone would like one, I can sell it to you and autograph it for you. I make more money when people buy it from me than when it goes through Amazon. But at any rate, that is my presentation.